Morning. It's September 10th today, and we're in Isaiah chapter 6. And if you know me very well, you'll know that this is a go-to passage for me. In fact, it's really difficult for me not to mention this passage almost every time that I teach or preach. I have to consciously remind myself that I say this a lot, but I haven't done it in this format, so I want to take you to it now. So we're in Isaiah 6, and this is the vision that Isaiah sees at the beginning of his ministry. And it starts out with this. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. And I just want to make a few comments on that part of it. First of all, I think I always notice and comment on this that when these angels look down at what's happening on earth, they see the whole earth is full of the glory of the Lord. And I am often tempted when I look at the world around me not to see the good, but to see the bad. Kind of a pessimistic view of what our world is like. And so it's good to be reminded when the angels look down, they see the glory of God because he is bringing redemption to the world, and they think that's a marvelous thing. And so should we. So we should actually have a sense of optimism for the world too, because God is doing great things and bringing about redemption to this place. Then as we go on, it says, at the sound of their voice, the doorposts and thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. I think this is something that we have a hard time imagining, and actually that Isaiah has a hard time putting down in human language, describing what heaven is like. But the reaction, I think, is the proper one that Isaiah has here. You got to think about Isaiah as probably the most righteous man of his generation, maybe one of the most righteous men who has ever lived. And yet when he finds himself in the presence of God, what does he say? He says, Woe to me, I cried. I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. I think what Isaiah sees right here is that his what he deserves when he is in God's presence is to be separated from God, to have spiritual death. That there's nothing that in him that should allow him to be in the presence of God. He's conscious of his own sin, and this brings a great amount of fear to him because he realizes that he's made for a relationship with God. He's made to be in his presence, and yet his sin is a chasm that makes it impossible for him to remain in his presence. So the one thing that he wants more than anything else is the one thing that he can't have, and that's to remain in God's presence. Then, of course, verse 6, one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken from tongs from the altar. With it he touched my mouth and said, See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin is atoned for. It's a beautiful picture of God bringing atonement to Isaiah, overcoming his greatest need and his greatest debt, and that is bringing him redemption and bringing him forgiveness for his sins, allowing him to be cleansed, and so he can remain in God's presence. God initiates this, and he makes it possible. He sees the desire of Isaiah's heart, but he reacts by cleansing Isaiah for it, from that sin to keep him in his presence. And I can't imagine the feelings that Isaiah must have at that moment, to the tremendous relief that he has, the tremendous joy and love that he would have for God that will then motivate him for what comes next. Verse 8, Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, Here am I, send me. There ought to be exclamation points on both of those things. Isaiah is overly joyed and overexcited to be able to do whatever it is that God has called him to do out of reaction for what God has already done for him. For cleansing his sin, the natural reaction, the only appropriate reaction is that whatever God would ask you to do, to be joyfully motivated to do that. And so I love this picture of what God does in redemption that's given to us in Isaiah chapter 6.